Yo, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Fantasy Football Prodigy channel, and in this video, I'm going to give you my top buy low and sell high players heading into Week 7 of the 2021 fantasy football season. Plus, I also have an additional bonus section today. I have one player that I really think you guys should hold. So we're going to start with the buy lows, and my first buy low candidate heading into Week 7 of the 2021 fantasy football season is going to be DJ Moore, wide receiver of the Carolina Panthers. This is just a case of a great player who has had a down couple of weeks. As you can see, his first 4 weeks of the season, he was balling out. This is half PPR scoring that I'm showing you guys right here. But the last 2 games, he's only had 6.3 and 8.4 half PPR points. If there's a manager in your league who has DJ Moore on their team, and they're the type of person to overreact to the last game or two, they just watch the box score, then maybe you can get DJ Moore on the cheap. Sam Darnold hasn't played the best the last couple weeks, but DJ Moore is still seeing a good amount of targets. He saw 7 a couple weeks ago and 13 last week. It just wasn't working out for them. I know the Panthers in general had a lot of drops in Week 6. I'm not really sure how many DJ Moore had, if any, but it was just a rough performance for the team in general. The next couple weeks, though, they get the New York Giants and the Atlanta Falcons. So I am expecting a bounce back for DJ Moore moving forward. All right, my next buy low candidate heading into Week 7 is going to be A.J. Brown of the Tennessee Titans. He was dealing with a little bit of supposed food poisoning heading into Week 6 in a tough matchup against the Buffalo Bills. He didn't do much in the first half. In fact, I'm not sure if he even had a catch in the first half, but he finished the game mostly, if not all, in the second half with 7 receptions for 91 yards. Like I said, that was a tough matchup, and really A.J. Brown has been pretty disappointing so far this season. This is his half PPR scoring right here. But in Week 7, he gets a nice matchup with the Kansas City Chiefs. And there's a couple of things to factor in here. 1, it's a good matchup in the immediate future for Week 7 against the Kansas City Chiefs. 2, A.J. Brown has been underperforming in general, but he showed a little bit of life in that second half of Week 6. So if he can keep that going forward, I think he should continue to get better than he was to start the year. And 3, if Julio Jones is out this week, it's also possible that he might miss games in the future just because he's been a little bit hobbled this year. So if Julio is, going to miss time at any point in the season, to me, that's just a boost for A.J. Brown. So when you combine all of those factors, and along with the fact that I think A.J. Brown just in general has been underperforming compared to his talent, I think that it's worth doing a little bit of a price check on A.J. Brown, because if the the manager who has A.J. Brown on their team is a little bit frustrated, you might be able to get him for a nice value. All right, so the next buy low player on this list is another guy with the last name Brown. That's going to be Marquise Brown of the Baltimore Ravens. In Week 6, he had his worst performance of the season, as you can see, or for fantasy, that is, only 5.5 half PPR fantasy points. He only saw 5 targets, caught 4 of them. So it was just a down week for Hollywood Brown. I think a lot of people are worried about the new rookie wide receiver, Rashad Bateman, making his appearance in Week 6. And while I get there might be some concern that Bateman might, soak up a little more targets, it's going to be hard to project how the receiving core, how the targets are distributed, because Sammy Watkins did not play in Week 6, while Rashad Bateman made his debut and was pretty involved. But when it's all said and done, I think Hollywood Brown is a talented player, and he really only needs that one big play. And with that being said, if there's a manager in your league who is worried about Hollywood Brown after a down week, or with the incoming rookie maybe taking more targets, even though that might not even be the case, we'll just have to see how that plays out. With all that being said, I think it's worth doing a little price check on Hollywood Brown in your league and seeing if you can get an explosive player on the cheap. All right, my next buy low player on this list is going to be Calvin Ridley, wide receiver of the Atlanta Falcons. There's a couple things to say here about Calvin Ridley. 1, I was really high on him in the draft season and, before the season started. With Julio Jones leaving Atlanta, I thought Calvin Ridley was going to take over and be an absolute monster. I drafted him over guys like Joe Mixon and DeAndre Hopkins in one league. And while I'm still doing pretty well in that league because I drafted Derrick Henry and we're sitting at 5-1, Calvin Ridley really still hasn't met his draft price that I paid for him. As you can see, to start the season, he's had 4 pretty not that great games, and then he missed Week 5 against the Jets for personal reasons, and then he had a bye week. So the manager that has Calvin Ridley in your league might be a little bit frustrated. They might feel a little bit burned after drafting Calvin Ridley so early. So with that being said, this is a player that, you might be able to get him at a discount. And looking forward, I think he will continue, not continue, I think he will turn things around and not continue to underperform as he has. He's seen a decent amount of targets. I mean, quite a good amount of targets, actually. 8, 10, 11, 13. He's just not really having any big plays. He's only had 1 touchdown. He missed a game. He had a bye week. Now in week 7, he gets the Miami Dolphins. Now, this is a bit of a tricky matchup because the Miami Dolphins were missing, or Byron Jones and Xavier Howard, 2 of their talented defensive backs, are on the injury report right now. They're currently questionable as of this recording, last I heard. So if they play, it'll be a little bit tougher of a matchup. If they do play, it could be a tougher matchup. If they play and they're hampered, that's where things get a little bit murky. But either way, I just think in general, like a long-term approach type of view, I think Calvin Ridley is just a player who's been underperforming, and looking long-term at the rest of the season, I think he will turn things around and turn into a much more productive player for fantasy than he has been. All right, next up, I have my final buy low player, and that's going to be Terry McLaurin, wide receiver for the Washington football team. He's coming off of 2 pretty rough games, one against the Saints, which was a pretty tough matchup, only 6.6 fantasy points and half PPR. And then week 6 in a great matchup against the Chiefs, he only had 4.8 points. I know he was dealing with a bit of an injury heading into that game. I did make him one of my starts of the week. He was one of my favorite starts for that matchup just because of how bad the Chiefs had been on defense. But Terry McLaurin really, I believe he was a little bit hampered by that injury. Plus, Taylor Heineke's performance has been a little bit up and down. And speaking of things being up and down, that's how he's been this whole season. 8.2, 22.2, 8.2, 27.3, and then a couple down games, like I said. And honestly, that could continue. He could be a little bit volatile just because of the quarterback play, with Taylor Heineke maybe not providing the most consistent, production at the quarterback position. But in general, kind of like with Calvin Ridley, I think if you look at the rest of the season as a whole, I think Terry McLaurin has a chance to be a little bit more consistent. He's had a couple down weeks, so if the manager in your league is a little bit frustrated with Terry McLaurin's lack of production the last couple weeks, then I think it's a good idea to see if you can get him on the cheap. Again, this is called a buy low, so I wouldn't overpay for Terry because I do have some concerns with the quarterback play and all that, but if you're able to get him for a nice value, I think that would be a good move for your team. All right, so next I'm going to do something I haven't done in any of these videos so far this season. As we're transitioning from the buy low to the sell high sections, I'm going to add a little tidbit here in between just for Tyler Lockett. To me, this is a player that you might be looking to buy or sell depending on the situation your team is in. We're 6 weeks into the season, so you're either, maybe you're somewhere in the middle, maybe you're sitting pretty, you're pretty much a lock to make the playoffs, or maybe your team is struggling. So Tyler Lockett, wide receiver for the Seattle Seahawks, he recently lost his quarterback, Russell Wilson, and last week against Pittsburgh with Geno Smith taking over as a starting quarterback in Seattle, he only caught 2 receptions on 7 targets for 35 yards. And let's be honest, his production projects to go down without Russell Wilson starting at quarterback just because Tyler Lockett makes so much of his production on those downfield targets that him and Russell Wilson are so good at connecting on. With Geno Smith, those are sure to suffer. So this is what I'm going to say about Tyler Lockett. If you have a bad record and need help immediately, I would trade Tyler Lockett away, possibly to a contender, for someone that will help you in the short term, while Russell Wilson is out and Geno Smith is the starting quarterback for Seattle. If you do have a good record, though, and you don't need to rely on Tyler Lockett, if you were able to attain Tyler Lockett and you don't really need to rely on him in the short term, you're not in desperate need of wins, I would try buying low on him. So this is someone that later in the season you can put into the lineup once Russell Wilson does return, because I think once Russ returns, even though Tyler Lockett has shown some volatility in his production, even with Russell Wilson, I think in general his value will go back up once Russell Wilson returns. So this is really a team-dependent thing, but I thought Tyler Lockett was worth mentioning in this video. And also, if I called Russell Wilson Russell Westbrook at any point, I apologize. I literally do that all the time without even thinking about it. All right, next I'm going to move on to my sell highs, and the first player on the list is going to be Damien Harris, running back for the New England Patriots. And I'm not going to lie, I made Damien Harris I made him a start against the Houston Texans, and he did okay, almost 10 half PPR fantasy points. In week 6, though, I did make him a sit just because I thought the Cowboys would be up big and that the Patriots would not be able to run the ball very much just because of the game script. But that was actually, it ended up being a very competitive game. Damien Harris had 18 carries for 101 yards and a touchdown. He had 17.3 half PPR fantasy points. And honestly, the guy looked really good. He's a really skilled, talented player. The only thing that I would say about him is that he is a little bit dependent on the game script. He's not really involved in the passing game, so even though I projected the game script wrong against Dallas, if there is a game in the future where the Patriots are losing early, Damien Harris's volume could suffer. As you can see already this season against the Saints in a game that they lost pretty heavily, he only had 6 carries. Against Tampa Bay, that's kind of not fair because, you know, that's a tough matchup. And I remember that game was pretty close, but the Patriots pretty much just abandoned the run against the Buccaneers in that matchup. So that wasn't really a game script thing, but long story short, he's a little bit dependent on the game script. In week 7 against the Jets, it's a good matchup. I expect the Patriots to be leading that game. So I think Damien Harris will have a good game in week 7. So maybe you want to hold on to him for another week and see if he has another great game. Maybe his value goes up even more. But if you want to sell him now after a productive game, get a player that's maybe a little bit more involved in the passing game, a little more consistent, a little more game script proof, then, you know, that might be a good move. Because, you know, against the Chargers, I could see the Chargers leading that one. Carolina, that could be a tough little matchup there. So he will have his games moving forward. But again, just the whole game script worries and the consistency worry me a little bit. So this is a player that I would sell high on. And the key there is to sell high. Don't sell him for nothing. But if someone is willing to overpay, that's when I would sell Damien Harris. And of course, every single buy low, sell high video, it seems like I got to talk about Cordarrelle Patterson. As I've said in other videos, I like Cordarrelle Patterson for the rest of the season, but in my opinion, he's currently just overperforming. He has a 3 touchdown game in there. He's, you know, before their bye week, he was like a really highly rated running back 1 in terms of the total scoring leaders. And I just, you know, maybe he will continue to be a running back 1 for fantasy. I expect that production to dip just a little bit, at least, if not a lot. And this is all about selling high. So Cordarrelle Patterson, running back for the Atlanta Falcons. If you can get rid of him for one of those true workhorse running backs, or, you know, sell Patterson plus maybe a little bit more for one of those guys, then I think that's a move you make. But Patterson is by no means someone that you have to get rid of. I have him in one league, and I sent out some trade offers to try to sell him. I remember, you know, a few weeks ago, I sent an offer for Aaron Jones coming off of a down game, like Cordarrelle Patterson plus something for Jones. I sent some offers sort of like that. None of them got accepted, so I just kept Cordarrelle Patterson on my team. So not a must sell by any means, but if you can get really, really high value, like high-end running back 1 value for Cordarrelle Patterson, then that is when I would definitely be looking to sell high on this player. All right, the final sell high player on this list is going to be Darrell Williams of the Kansas City Chiefs. And sort of like Tyler Lockett, this is really team dependent. This player is really only a sell high if you do not need him in the short term. He just had a great game for fantasy against the Washington football team. Wasn't very efficient, 21 for 62 on the ground, but he did have 2 rushing touchdowns. He had 3 receptions on 4 targets for 27 yards. So it's kind of strange how Clyde Edwards-Helaire, their starting running back in Kansas City, goes down. Darrell Williams takes over, and all of a sudden he's putting up better numbers than Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Obviously, that was in large part due to touchdowns, but it is just kind of frustrating, especially for all you Clyde Edwards-Helaire managers out there. But he's coming off of a great game. A lot of that based on the touchdowns. I think, you know, touchdowns are very volatile. They're hard to predict. I think, you know, he's not going to score 2 touchdowns most games. Maybe we see that efficiency go up against Tennessee, so he won't necessarily need the 2 touchdowns. But with all that being said, no matter what, this is just a player that, unless something bad happens to Clyde Edwards-Helaire, their starting running back, Darrell is just a player who is filling in the short term as the starter. So if someone in your league, perhaps the Clyde Edwards-Helaire manager, needs running back production in the short term, also perhaps maybe because of the crazy bye weeks that are going on this week in week 7, and if you don't really need Darrell Williams, I would try to sell Darrell, you know, a short-term player, to a team that needs him, so that you in return can get more of a season-long value that you can use, you know, for the rest of the season. So that is a trade I would look at making. But again, if you need Darrell Williams, if you're suffering with bye weeks, if you're, you know, if you already have Clyde Edwards-Helaire and you pick Darrell Williams up as your handcuff, then I would just hold on to Darrell. But, you know, there are definitely situations where I think you can capitalize on this short-term value with Darrell Williams. All right, and next up, we have a player who is not a buy or a sell. This is a new section that I'm adding today in this video. It's called a hold. So this means I wouldn't necessarily be looking to buy or sell this player. That's going to be Darrell Henderson. We have another Darrell on the list after Darrell Williams, who was a sell high. Now we got Darrell Henderson of the LA Rams as a hold. So if you look at his production, he's been at around 15 points every game, except last week against the Giants. A player that I made one of my starts of the week, a really high stardom for me. He had a great game, 23.7 points, and he's been fantastic for fantasy. A lot of people out there might be thinking, oh, I have to capitalize on this value. I have to get rid of him. He's not going to keep this up. To me, the only thing that can stop Darrell Henderson is injury. If you are worried about injury, then okay, sell him. He has suffered, some injuries in the past. He's already missed one game this season. But to me, in general, he is a hold. I am not worried about his production at all moving forward. This is a great offense. He's seeing great volume. You see his rushing attempts. He's seeing a handful of receptions here and there. But this is a team that, in the Rams, that is usually going to be winning games. So, or at least competitive in games. So most games are going to be able to run the ball. Darrell Henderson is the lead running back there, and he has the juice to put up stats. The next 2 weeks, he gets Detroit and Houston. Those are great matchups. They should be winning those games, and he should see a ton of volume. So, I mean, if anything, if you can get Darrell Henderson, if someone out there is saying, oh, I don't trust this production, Darrell Henderson isn't a guy who's going to keep producing, then okay, then I guess he would be a buy low. But just in general, he is a hold for me. I'm not trying to get rid of him at all. And then if you look at his snap percentage, he's been playing quite a bit of snaps just in terms of the percentage of the offensive snaps. So, yeah, there's really nothing to dislike about Darrell Henderson. He's just not really this guy that a lot of people are used to being this, locked and loaded running back one for the rest of the season. But to me, that's just what he is. All right, that's going to do it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Please make sure to drop a like if you enjoyed the video or found it helpful. Subscribe to the channel for more fantasy football content, and I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out.